The sound of the scream tore through the quiet afternoon like a bullet. It came from the old white house at the end of Willow Creek Lane, the one everyone avoided because its windows were always shut tight and its garden long dead. The scream wasn't a normal cry for help. It was raw, desperate, and filled with a kind of terror that made every instinct in Aaron Colt's body come alive. His hands clenched, heart pounding. The soldier in him, the man who'd once led a rescue unit in the Middle East, reacted before his mind could catch up. Within seconds, he was off his porch, sprinting across the street, his boots thudding against the cracked pavement. When he reached the front door, the sound came again. This time weaker. He didn't hesitate. With one forceful kick, the door splintered open. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of doing what's right even when the past haunts you, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your support helps us keep bringing real, emotional stories that remind the world compassion still matters. Inside, sunlight filtered through dusty curtains, illuminating a living room frozen in time. Papers littered the floor, the smell of burnt food hung in the air, and in the middle of it all, collapsed against a broken chair, was a woman, trembling, clutching her arm. Aaron's heart dropped as recognition hit him like a punch. It was her, Nora Vance, the journalist who had destroyed his life. 3 years ago, Aaron Colt had been a decorated Army veteran, a father and a husband. His unit had been ambushed overseas, and when he came home, broken but alive, Nora had written an expose accusing him of misconduct, twisting classified reports into a scandal that cost him everything: his honor, his career, and eventually, his marriage. His wife, unable to bear the constant harassment and whispers, left with their son Mason. Aaron had spent months trying to clear his name, but the damage was done. The world had chosen to believe the headlines. Nora Vance's name had become a symbol of justice, and Aaron Colt was branded a disgrace. And now here she was, the woman who had shattered him, lying on her living room floor, bleeding, terrified, and helpless. For a moment, he stood frozen. Every instinct screamed for him to turn away. Let her face what she'd given him: pain, humiliation, isolation. But then, through the haze of his anger, he saw the terror in her eyes. It wasn't pride or arrogance. It was the same look he'd seen on villagers caught in war zones, on civilians desperate to survive. He dropped to his knees beside her, his training taking over. "Don't move," he muttered, checking her arm. It was badly bruised, maybe dislocated. "You called for help." She nodded weakly, barely able to speak. "Someone broke in, my phone gone." He scanned the room. There were signs of struggle: an overturned lamp, broken glass, a trail of muddy footprints leading toward the back door. Whoever had done this was gone now. Aaron grabbed a towel, wrapped it around her arm to steady it, and gently lifted her onto the couch. His hands were steady, his voice calm, but inside, every emotion he'd buried for years came roaring back. When Nora's breathing slowed and color returned to her face, her eyes fluttered open, meeting his. "Aaron," she whispered, disbelief etched across her face. You shouldn't be here." He didn't answer. Instead, he checked the locks, made sure the intruder wasn't still around, and then stood at the window, watching the empty street. The world outside was quiet, normal, painfully ordinary compared to the storm inside that small house. Hours passed. Police came, took her statement, thanked Aaron, and left. When the last officer drove away, silence fell again. Aaron turned to leave, but Nora's voice stopped him. "You could have let me die," she said softly. "After what I did to you, why didn't you?" He paused at the doorway. "Because that's not who I am," he said quietly. "You took everything from me, but you don't get to take that too." She didn't speak again, and he walked out without looking back. But the story didn't end there. Over the next week, Aaron tried to shake the encounter off, but the memory of that terrified woman wouldn't leave him. Despite everything, something about the way she'd looked, broken, haunted, kept replaying in his mind. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. He saw in her what he saw in himself every morning, a person carrying the weight of something unforgivable. Then, one afternoon, there was a knock at his door. He opened it to find Nora standing there, arm in a sling, face pale but determined. She held a small folder. "I need 5 minutes," she said. "Then I'll never bother you again." Reluctantly, he let her in. Inside, she handed him the folder. "Everything I wrote about you, it wasn't the full story," she began, voice trembling. "There were documents I never saw, classified ones. Someone used me to bury the truth. You weren't guilty, Aaron. The mission you led saved lives. But exposing that would have exposed someone higher up. They needed a scapegoat, and I—" Her voice broke. "I thought I was uncovering corruption. I didn't realize I was helping it." Aaron stared at her. The rage he thought had burned out long ago flared again. But this time it wasn't just anger. It was exhaustion, heartbreak, and disbelief all tangled together. He wanted to scream, to throw her out, to tell her it was too late. But behind her guilt, he saw sincerity. "I've been getting threats," she continued, "from the same people who covered up your mission. The break-in, it wasn't random. They want me silent." The truth hung heavy in the room. Aaron realized then that saving her wasn't just an accident, it was fate. The same world that had destroyed him was now turning on her, and for the first time in years, he had the power to do something about it. He could walk away, or he could stand up again, not for revenge but for what was right. The next days blurred into action. Aaron used his old contacts, the few friends who still believed in him, to dig into the evidence Nora had found. Together, they pieced together the chain of deception that had started years ago, a cover-up that led to his dishonor, her rise to fame, and dozens of innocent soldiers buried under lies. They worked in silence, in the dim light of his small living room, old files scattered across the table. For the first time in years, Aaron felt purpose again. But danger came quickly. One night, as they reviewed encrypted emails, headlights flashed outside his house. A car idled too long. Nora froze. "They found us," she whispered. Aaron pulled the curtain slightly. Two men in black suits stepped out, scanning the street. Without hesitation, Aaron grabbed Nora's hand. "We're leaving." They slipped out through the back door, running across the fields behind his home. The air was cold, the sky fading into dusk. Every muscle in his body remembered the rhythm of escape, of survival. They hid in an old barn until the sound of engines faded into the distance. When they finally caught their breath, Nora looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "You should have left me," she said. "You owe me nothing." He looked at her, eyes steady. "Maybe not," he said quietly, "but I've spent too long hating the world. Maybe this is how I start forgiving it." Days later, with the help of Aaron's contacts, Nora released the real story, this time with proof. It spread like wildfire. Headlines flipped overnight. The world that had once crucified Aaron Colt now called him a hero. But the victory wasn't about vindication. For Aaron, it was about closure. He visited his son Mason after 3 years of silence. The boy, now 9, ran into his arms, confusion melting into joy. "Mom said you weren't coming back," Mason whispered. Aaron held him tighter. "I wasn't ready," he said, "but I am now." As for Nora, she left journalism. The guilt never fully faded, but she dedicated herself to a foundation that supported veterans wrongfully accused or forgotten by the system. She and Aaron crossed paths often, at events, fundraisers, shared moments of quiet understanding. There were no apologies anymore, only a strange kind of peace between them. One bright morning, standing outside the rebuilt community center he'd helped fund, Aaron looked out at the crowd. He saw his son playing, Nora handing out flyers, laughter mixing with sunlight. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel heavy. It felt possible. He smiled faintly, whispering to himself, "Sometimes the person you save is the one who broke you." If this story touched your heart, if you believe people can change, that forgiveness is stronger than hate, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your voice helps spread stories that remind us of the goodness still alive in the world.